everyone, this is Anik Ina from Write and Change Lives. I am super excited to have Anjanette Fennell with me tonight. She is a literary agent and coach, and she's going to answer all of our questions about book agents, self-publishing, traditional publishing, and all that world, which is a bit of a blurry thing for a lot of aspiring authors. So, Anjanette, thank you for being with us today.
It's totally my pleasure. I always love talking about books, always.
So I have a lot of questions and I want to jump right away in all of them.
Awesome.
So
let's do it.
One of the things that we have recently spoken about was the difference between self-publishing and traditional publishing. And I spoke to Annie Grace about that because she published both ways and she was talking about the difference. But for you as an agent, I would be really interested in having more information from an agent's perspective. What is the difference between one and the other, and why and when to go for one or the other?
That's right. I think that's a great question. I'm really happy that you want to get a slightly different perspective because, of course, my perspective, I think that most people would think that I would tend toward traditional publishing. And in some cases I do, but I have to say, I don't know if this is just a natural personality characteristic or it's because I'm just such a champion of authors. But I see that it really has to come down to the project itself, to the actual manuscript. And even more than that, whether you go traditional or self-publishing may have to do with the timeline. So the ways that I approach this, and I do ask all of the clients that I might coach if they have an idea, but even those that I represent, I certainly don't have a strict line for those in my boutique agency. If they eventually decide that they want to self-publish, that would be something that we chat about, and they are empowered to do that. So essentially for me, the difference would be at this point, and things are changing so quickly, as we discussed a little bit, a traditional publisher still has the added gravitas, obviously, and especially if you're with one of the big six. They do have a dedicated marketing and sales team, and of course, they front the money for the editing. If they're not fronting the money for the editing, then you're probably looking at something that's a hybrid publisher, not quite a traditional publisher, and that's okay too. I think that there's room in the market for a hybrid as well, because whilst there are all these benefits to traditional publishing, potential like easier distribution, an easier time getting into bookstores, although they still don't make that decision. They've got a sales team that is going out there trying to sell, generally in bulk, to larger retailers now, like Targets and Kmart's. In Australia, it would be Big W. In the US, it would be Walmart, Costco, because we've seen the demise, sadly, of some smaller independent bookstores. It's ever so slightly different, I think, as well in the UK. So just in case there are people, I do work with publishers that are in each of the regions. So I know the UK, certainly the US and Australia and New Zealand. But here's the thing, traditional publishing, even with all their resources, also has limited resources. And that means they have limited time to spend on each project. They are not this wonderful utopia where even if you get a contract that looks perfect, it doesn't mean that everything is necessarily going to go smoothly. But I still want that for people. I still want for my clients to get an advance, although I'm not a proponent of massive advances, because it puts the onus on the author to sell more. If you don't sell out your advance, you're going to have a harder time getting another publishing contract. And believe me, even if you're going to other publishers, they're going to ask about those sales. So there's no clear answer. The other thing with a traditional publisher is by the time they've acquired it, the author has a lot less control. So you could come to agreement on a book cover, but really they're just being kind, asking you. At the end of the day, they can change it at the last minute. And I have heard of that happening. And so it's nice if you're in agreement. And I would say almost all the time they want their author to be happy, but they are looking at their bottom line. So they're going to go with the plan, with the look, with the feel, with the format that they believe will sell. They are likely to be right, but they could be wrong. But at the end of the day, they fronted the money. So they're going to make that decision, and you just kind of have to wear it, which is where I've seen some people who've started with traditional publishing feel a little reticent about necessarily going back to it because they want to retain that creative control. The same can be said with the editing, right? So some things can be changed, and I do advise my authors that if you've got to that stage, you have to know when to fight for something and when to let go because it's no longer yours. It's really for the reader. And if you've entrusted a traditional publisher, you have to trust that they're making these decisions and recommendations based on their expertise and historical sales. So they're not just, pulling it out of thin air.
Yeah. One question, and I'm really happy that you're here with us because I love these expert interviews so that we can get all this insiders information.
Yeah.
Kind of to give that information that people do not get on Google because that's
right.
the real information, that's the real state of affairs. And I've had clients tell me, I want to write a book and I want to make money from my book, and so I want to find a publisher. And a part of me is like, yeah, cool. But the way things are right now is that and I'm not saying, like, I don't want to put my limiting beliefs into
yes.
But it's just being realistic. It's like,
you're right.
It's not like you're going to have an idea and then you're going to get an agent and then the agent is going to find this $10,000.
Oh, I wish. Yeah.
So
I wish it were that easy.
Can you tell me a little bit about that and how that doesn't end there? Because
right.
Then there's the royalties, there's giving away the copyright, there's all of that stuff. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Well, I will say that you don't give up your copyright. You have copyright. You retain copyright, and the ISBN is purchased and given to you. However, you're right in that earnings go through and are upheld based on the contract. So certainly, if you ever get a contract, even if you don't have an agent, I would highly recommend seeking out an agent who will review contracts. It's also good and can be good to also go to a lawyer, but an agent who is willing to do contract work like that, I'm not the only one in Australia who does that either, but can be really valuable because they know what is a standard first offer and what are those things that are just a little bit askew. I wanted to point out really quickly too, just some of the benefits to traditional publishing because I probably painted it a little bit not necessarily in the best light, but you do have a team with you. You're not on your own, and you have to know that almost anybody that works in publishing is not doing it for the money. Like, yes, the paycheck, but publishing is not a super highly well-paid profession, and most of us take our work home. That means we're reading in our private time, not just on the clock. So there are all sorts of reasons why going traditional is nice and like having a team, and that can be a wonderful pressure off. However, to your point, it is not this fantastical thing that I think people have built up, kind of like the idea of I will write my magnum opus, my novel, when I have a perfect desk in a perfect,
Yes.
woman's
By the
shed.
lake and
That's right. And that's when I'll do it. And that's what it looks like. In fact, I always bring this up now. It reminds me of James Caan in the movie Misery, based on the book. It's like, that's what that scenario is like for me. You don't go just be a hobbit for a while or a hermit rather, and just do that by myself. Then some crazy Kathy Bates character might come get you. Writing takes place by writing every day. And traditional publishing doesn't look like I'm the author, the creative, I've created it, now I'll send it away. And maybe I have to be involved in the editing. But after that, everyone else takes care of it. And I'll just show up at these different PR opportunities that they set up for me. That's one of my main things that I share when people talk about a marketing proposal, part of their book proposal. In that marketing analysis, you don't just say, I'll show up where you tell me. They know that. That would be in the contract. That's a guarantee. They want to know what else. So traditional publishing has all this wonderful stuff. But generally, you were asking a little bit about what's that process like? Like, how do you, was that it? How do you even get there?
Yeah, so let's start from the beginning so that all of our viewers can have an idea.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say I want to write a book. So I have an idea, I want to write a book.
Yeah.
What do I do if I want to go for traditional publishing? And what will that look like?
Okay, so what that looks like is, first, I want you to write the entire manuscript. I know that there are stories out there where people say, I sell things on proposal. Yes, but lightning strikes human beings sometimes too, right? But you've been out in lots of storms and never been struck. I'm assuming maybe you have, maybe one of the viewers has, but it's very, very rare. Okay, so the one reason I have is, number one, if you start to approach agents because you know you want a traditional publisher, in the US, it's almost completely agent-led. Like you must have an agent. In the UK, that's the same. It may even be a little bit more strict than the US. In Australia, there are a certain number of publishers that will take manuscripts, including the big ones, but they have very, very tight containers around that, meaning it may be Manuscript Monday and they only take it within these time periods, and it has to be in this format and then you're really only just going into a slush pile. So it's not quite as easy. So I still recommend, if you want to go traditional, the first port of call is actually an agent. There are a few reasons why that's good. But first, say you've had the idea and you think, I want to do it. If you approach an agent and say, I've got this, you work really hard maybe on your query letter, even though you haven't finished the manuscript, and the synopsis, even though you haven't finished the manuscript, which seems strange to me. Even if you did those things and they were perfect, what's the first thing the agent's going to ask for? The manuscript. They don't want an idea. They want to see that you can prove it. And they need to know that you can do a beginning, a middle, and an end. Right? The only other people who can get away with this on proposal thing more frequently are the people who have a large flipping platform. If you are famous, a celebrity, or you're a YouTube celeb or whatever, then an agent and thereby a publisher look at that and say, well, this person already has access to all these people who have said that they're fans. They're betting on a horse that's kind of run some races, even if not officially. Yeah. They don't actually necessarily care if they're a brilliant writer, because maybe they give them help. So that's how that happens. Presuming anybody watching is not famous and not a celebrity and maybe has a following under the hundreds of thousands, but I would even say it might be tougher than that. You might need millions to go straight from proposal to, again, not a specific, that's definitely a generalization, but I just want to prepare people for that.
Yeah.
So number one is commit to your idea and show that you actually want to write it, that you're not writing it just for the payday. Because again, if you're writing it just for the payday, I'd probably reassess whether or not you really want to write it. I don't know that the right energy would be in the book. And no famous, like your favorite book in the world, I guarantee you is not written for the payday only, because it takes a lot of work to go from idea, from concept to completion. So number one, actually finish your manuscript. Number two, get your manuscript edited. So we did have a brief chat about qualified readers. So even if you don't know any editors, I would find readers that you know the genre that you're writing within, and then you give them very clear instructions on the feedback that you want, especially if they happen to be brilliant family and friends who are very kind, or anybody else who's not necessary. If they're in publishing, you know, maybe we can give them a pass. But if they aren't, you really want to say, this is the kind of feedback I'm looking for. I'm looking for if any of the sentences are confusing, or if you don't understand what's going on. And then you say, that's all I want you to give me feedback on, right? You create these really clear boundaries, because otherwise people say stuff that you don't want them to say. And even we are such crazy, complex individuals that even if you get positive feedback, your internal editor, which is what I call what's commonly known as the super ego, or somebody else might call it the voice of fear, or whatever you want to call it, it will morph that positive feedback and discount it for you so kindly and tell you that they were just saying that because. So it doesn't matter. So I say, write it, then get people reading it and giving you the feedback that you explicitly ask for, nothing else. And then I would edit it. Now you can get somebody who is a professional editor to edit it for you. But I want you to be as discerning, if not more discerning, about who you entrust, and know that everything they say has to come through the filter of you. So just because somebody has editor after their name, or they've had X number of certifications and all these qualifications, doesn't mean that their word is gospel. In fact, they might give you advice that is directly conflicting with something that somebody at a publisher might find endearing. So say they tell you, you need to kill off this character. They're horrible and they just don't even make sense. Well, who knows? It's possible that at a publisher, they could come back to you and say, I loved it, but there was just something missing. I wish there'd been this kind of feeling. And that was the feeling that was given with that character, right? So all editorial suggestions are just that, unless it's a spelling error, in which case you just take their advice. Because almost anybody here would know Chris as well. I think you trust somebody if you've got them editing your book for copy. You've got to trust them to help make it more readable for others. Now, you might like it that way, but unless you have a really strong argument for why it can only be the way you said, if somebody like Chris has edited it and asked you to do it a different way, she's not doing it just because it's for fun. She's doing it so that it isn't jarring for a reader, so that they are not distracted, and the whole goal being you pull somebody into your story and you keep them there, right? That's our ultimate goal. Once you've had it edited, then you create a beautiful query letter, and that's more for another time. You create a synopsis, which is not a back cover blurb. You will get some dissent. Some people say leave a bit of mystery, but my experience and experience of other agents I know is I really want to know the beginning, the middle, and the end. I want you to, it's not a back cover blurb where I'm going to read it and I want to be surprised. Yeah. I want to know that you know how to do the whole story. And I'll be totally honest, writing a great synopsis is an art form in itself. And it is not easy, even for those writers that I know have been writing for many, many years. So if you find it challenging, you're in very good company with lots of really, really amazing writers. Once you've got those two things, then you approach an agent. Once an agent, okay, go. Yeah.
So how do you find the agent?
Yes, good question. You know, having this wonderful thing called the internet means we have access to loads of people. So I was just trying right before we talked to upload a video that outlined the 5 ways that people could find agents. I'm not even joking. I thought it was hilarious. But if we're talking online, there are specific websites that help you identify agents. And essentially what you want to do is create, if you're a list person, create a list. If you're a spreadsheet person, create a spreadsheet. Do whatever works for you, but definitely keep track. There's a great resource through writersdigest.com, and it may be /literary agents, or there's something, and I'll try to provide that later. But if you just Google writersdigest.com literary agents, it will take you to a particular newsletter. What I love about that particular site is it always highlights new agents. The reason they do this is new agents are a beautiful opportunity, especially for a debut author, to find representation. Why? Because they're building their list. They're super motivated and excited.
But aren't you supposed to go for the seasoned agent because they've got the contacts?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Most agents, I don't include myself with this because I work for myself with my own boutique agency. But many, many agents that you'll find work for a company. So they're one of multiple agents. And if they're a new agent, they would have a mentor within that company. So any contacts or connections that they have for that company, that agent will have. And to be honest, what you're looking for is your opportunity. You're looking for the open window or the open door, right? Just because, and I did see this as a question, so this is where I'll address it. Is it once you get an agent, it's like an agent for life, or is it just for that one book? It is neither of those things. It is an agent for as long as you and the agent want to have each other. Now, most of the time, if you find an agent and they want to offer you representation, they will offer you a particular contract. There are not likely to be massive differences between the contracts, but there could be massive differences between the agents. And I was just giving this advice again on how to find the right agent for me. And you can't always go with just because they're a New York agent. One of my clients had a New York agent and no longer has the New York agent. And she broke up with the agent and then ended up coming to me. Why? Because she found that even though that was exciting, her manuscript didn't sell in this really brief time. I would say most agents are only, if that's all they do, agent, and they don't do coaching and there's no other income for them. This will address another question that I saw about how does the structure work. But if they don't do anything else, they only get paid when they sell your manuscript. So they're only likely to take manuscripts that they think are ready, meaning they might love it, but if it's not ready, they might not offer you a contract. Now, if they really love it, but they're not ready to offer a contract, they may say, go away. And if they're kind, they will give you some feedback and leave the door open to reapproach them once you've made the changes. But they don't have time, right? They got bills to pay. So they're not being mean and horrible, but they have to only take the projects that they think they might be able to sell in 6 months or less. Now, you could be on their books longer.
Yeah.
Even if they don't sell it in that time, but chances are they haven't sold it and they're one of the main New York agents or seasoned agents, you're going to have a hard time getting them to return your calls. Again, they're not evil. It's just, if you only get paid when something sells and you cannot find a way or a person to sell it to, you're going to move on to the thing that, right? Most of your time is going to be taken up elsewhere. New agents, this is why I say new agents kind of are the best of both worlds. You've got somebody who's really motivated, who doesn't have a list of so many other clients that they're fielding calls from and trying to give love and attention to, and they can take meetings with colleagues. So even if they don't know all the people directly, they're still friendly. The thing is, even when you sign on with an agent, the contract is likely for a particular time period, kind of like a lease. So it may say, you know, this is an agreement starting on you know, for a year or starting for 6 months, and then kind of on a rolling basis until someone severs the contract via writing with 30 days notice, whatever. And say you have a year contract with an agent, and say they do sell your first manuscript. And then after that manuscript, you just realize you don't gel with them. You could break up with that agent, but depending on your contract, chances are you will still have to be paying them the royalties or their cut, which is standard might be 15%. Some other agents might take 12.5%. Some of us say 10%. If I could find another way of organizing it, I would, because I don't personally like to take a cut of someone's book forever. I want my author to have their full royalties, but it is what it is at the moment, and that it's kind of, it turns out to kind of be a retainer, right? So there is no separate retainer. If you get representation from somebody and they say you have to pay me some money first, that's a back right up. You don't pay an agent before they sell your work.
Ooh, so let's talk a bit about that. So we got to the point where you look for an agent, you go on Writer's Digest and you look for the agent.
That's one way. Yeah.
You find an agent, and let's say I found you, and I want to work with you. So what's the next step? Money-wise, contract-wise, condition-wise?
If you are working with somebody, and so because I have my coaching business, I'll just say really quickly, that is totally separate from my agent representation. So one does not impact the other. If I'm representing somebody as an agent, it is simply sending out a contract that would say, outline the agreement, as I said, like a lease, you know, or you're renting an apartment or something. This is how long, and these are the agreements that we both have. You won't approach other agents. You won't try to sell your manuscript separately. You know, it's all, we're in collaboration now, and I will actively try to sell your manuscript. And if I sell it, I make X percentage for the life of that contract, and that contract being the contract between the publisher and the author.
Ooh, okay.
The reason that is and it's very rare that you can get around that if they have sold your manuscript, and you really shouldn't try to renege on that if they sold your manuscript, because they did that work. But that's it. They would get, say their fee is 15%, they would get 15% of your royalties for the length of that contract with that publisher. So you have one contract with the agent, and then you have another potential contract with the publisher. Now, the way that royalties are paid are actually direct to your agent. So the agent receives them, and then they do the bookkeeping, and then they send you the remaining portion. So they would send you the 85%.
So you have to be careful, because you could have an agent just keep 100% and then not pay you.
And well, look, and I don't know of anybody who does that. And I've never even heard a scenario of that. There probably is one, but don't be frightened. But it does actually get you, if you think in those terms. I want people to start thinking about their agent as a relationship. So I'd rather have people select their agent based on gut instinct. When they tell me and even if at the beginning everything is lovely and everything works and you go with your gut instinct and then things change, it's like any other relationship. This one just with a contract. So let's call it marriage. Marriage is dissolved, and then you go through whatever you need to based on your contract to dissolve that. And it's perfectly fine to go and find another agent afterward. It's a little bit dodgy to try to line up an agent before you break up with your agent, but let's be real, that happens in real life too, with our other relationships where people do that. It's not ideal, but chances are you might just be trying to test the waters and see, can I keep going? The fact is that some people, if they've had an agent who's successfully sold their manuscript, you might develop a really good relationship with the publisher. And so you might feel like you can go on your own. And that's totally possible. It still means that anytime they're offering you something, that publisher offering you a new contract, you still want to get somebody else to vet the contract for you, unless you are a lawyer and you know publishing contracts, right? You still want that support. So if you need to, get that support on an ad hoc basis. It leads me to that other question where somebody was saying, sorry, I'm just looking to the side, was saying, this really goes along with the advantages of having a book agent as opposed to not. So number one, we've already kind of talked about, is it all about the agent's network? Kind of. But also, there are certain publishers that will not take unsolicited manuscripts. So if you've identified a publisher that has said that, then you do need an agent. And they might be, so I have acted as the key for certain people without actually officially putting them onto my books, because I really think if I've vetted the manuscript and I think that that person should be able to approach a publisher, then I will do that for somebody without locking them in at all. And I hate that kind of thought. But generally speaking, it doesn't work that way anyway. But just know, if you've identified certain publishers, and I would say like the big six, they're not going to take unsolicited, and say they did, they would have had an open day, and then yours is just another manuscript in the pile. What you want to do is have somebody championing your work. And it's not just about network, but it's about really getting to have relationships with these people. So it's not, I know the people and therefore, it's like, I know what they've been acquiring. I know what their personality is like, not just what the imprint acquires, but what that person really looks for in a manuscript. And I've got one that has that, so I'm going to approach that person, right? That's what they open up for you. The other advantage is on long term. So if you want somebody to be a team player and help advise your career, an agent's a good way to go. Why? Because they know the trends that are going on in the market. And whilst I don't think an agent should say, hey, have you got, could you just really quick write a Girl on the Train manuscript for me? If that's not what you want to write, if your agent says that, don't take their advice, please. Okay. Just write what you want to write, because otherwise it's not going to be that good. But for the most part, that ongoing relationship, and that's the relationship that I have with my clients, is really about being their support, especially in those times where the confidence starts to wane. And, perseverance is the number one way to succeed in traditional publishing. And sometimes it's tiring. So having an agent on your side can just be that little extra boost. They can give you feedback on what's been selling. There's all sorts of advantages, but having that person on your side that loves your writerly voice, that encourages you to keep writing, that might tell you, oh, if you're considering multiple projects and you can't decide, well, they might help find some words for you so that you can decide which was the manuscript that's next best for you to write. They might be a little bit more market driven than I would be. I'm a little bit more supportive of the creative process, so I'm not such a hard line. I don't believe that my writers should just write within one genre or one niche at all. Publishers feel differently, and so some agents might feel differently, because again, they don't do any coaching, they don't do any edit, they don't do anything else for their money, and so they just have to sell the book. So they're going to say, this is what's selling. Have you got that? So, but there are other good agents out there that don't just do that.
One question that I'm sure people want to know is, how much time usually do you have to wait before your book is picked up by a publisher? Like,
how long is like the longest piece of string ever? It can be frustratingly long, because so this is one of the reasons why self-publishing becomes a much more attractive option.
Yeah.
Because we want to get it done now. Or say you have a platform, maybe not like celebrity status platform, but you have a platform and you know you have readers that want to start reading it. Well, look, I'll be real with you. Traditional publishing can take a while, even once they've acquired you. So we're not even talking the time it takes to find the right fit for a publisher, but how long does it take once it's with the publisher? I sold a 2-book deal where the first novel had actually been self-published originally, had not been available for very long before I saw it and said, hey, I think that's really highly marketable. Have you thought about having that traditionally published? And it's a very different story. So I don't want to say this is the norm. There is no norm. But it took about 2.5 years to get the publisher to take it. Now, the beautiful sort of Cinderella part of the story is it ended up going back to the very first publisher I sent it to, because I knew they were the right fit. It was the right individual publisher at the larger publisher. But the way this works, and so this is another insight that we maybe didn't address that people don't necessarily know, is that once an individual publisher says, I love it, that's not the end of the story. They don't get to offer you the contract right then. They take your manuscript to an acquisitions meeting. Acquisitions meetings are held regularly, and that's a round table. Now they have to get the rest of the people around the table to agree. Now, every particular publisher is different. There are still some smaller publishers that might be considered independent publishers that still have a small enough team that by the time they're saying, I love it, they've already been talking about it. Mm-hmm. So there's kind of agreements already. That specific, I can think of one specific publisher that's well known here in Australia where that's the case, that pretty much everybody is kind of across it at the beginning. But almost everyone else is taking it to an acquisitions meeting. They're not making that decision independently, and they have to get that agreement across the board. Now, the first time my client's manuscript was taken, everybody loved it, but one person said no, and that was the standing publicity director. So it was a no, thank you.
No.
That was painful, yes. But we kept going, my client and I, and she was brilliant, and she found a way and another collaborator to sort of morph the project into something else as well, and we just kept submitting it, not super widely, but still multiple double-digit submissions. And then it came to the point where I thought, you know what, we've reached this stage where I'm going to reapproach that original publisher and say, look, all of these things have happened. This is about to take off. Do you want to get on the train or not? And I was kind in the way that I said it, but essentially it was, I think, I would have sent that on a Wednesday afternoon or a Thursday morning. I had a missed call on Thursday afternoon from the individual publisher, and I didn't work on Fridays last year because of family commitments. So I thought, oh, well, I'll I'll ring her back on Tuesday when I'm back. And lots of people in publishing work part-time as well. So that also adds to all of this thing. As I said, not super highly paid. You're doing it because you love books. But by Monday at 11 a.m., I got an email from her saying, we would like to make an offer. So I hadn't even been there. And officially, the acquisitions meeting was on Tuesday, the next day. But they had been talking over the weekend, and that was it. Then we got it up to a 2-book deal, and that was it. But 2.5 years. And then
So
she got the publisher she wanted.
She got a no, and then 2.5 years passed, and then she got a yes from that same publisher.
Because in that first scenario, just a few months later, that publicity director left. Oh. But also, I was still in contact with that publisher, and she still, before that time, it just wasn't the right time. It wasn't the right timing. So again, we had this full manuscript. It had already been published. So all of this kind of editing took place. So even from that was in May, we got the offer, and then it was released it was officially going to be October, but it was released in September. So they did book cover design, they did do some editing, but that was with a fully complete manuscript that had already been in front of lots of people, right? So they still take it through that process. And then she finished her next book by, whilst going through the editing, she was writing another manuscript and then had to deliver that in December of that same year. Mm-hmm. And that one will be coming out, well, now it's a little bit jogged. It was going to be October, but it's been relisted for another month. Okay. in the following year. So generally speaking, so if you think about it, she's had this complete manuscript for years, right? People have actually been reading it for years, and we love it. But that was a long process. And even with all that completed stuff, it still was kind of a long process. You think, oh, I've already done all the typesetting and all that stuff. No, they need to rebrand it for themselves, especially if you like an E.L. James, maybe some of the watchers love the 50 Shades series, and that's fine. But E.L. James, the reason Random House picked it up is, number one, it's already sold a ton. They would have rejected it early on. But of course they'll take it because that's money. And they had distribution channels that she originally didn't have, going through a smaller self-publishing type of deal. So they knew they could get it out to more people. And of course, that's one of the best success stories as far as traditional publishing goes, taking somebody who's self-published, because the company themselves gave huge bonuses to everyone within Random House that year for Christmas or end of year bonus. So there's no definitive line. If you self-publish, can you be traditionally published? For sure. Is it common? No, it's still not common, because all the different reasons, all the reasons that they may not have taken your manuscript in the first place still stand. The leverage that you get is, again, greater platform, amazing sales, or they're specifically looking for something. In our case, it was actually, if there had been massive sales, that might have put more of a wedge in there, right? There's going to you could either have very little in terms of sales, so it's not out there as some other work, because of course a big publisher wants it to be known as, that's our book. Well, if it's already known separately, how can it be their book? But yeah. I'm sure a lot of people here might have heard of Denise Duffield Thomas. And she just recently, but again, hers was not straightforward. She'd had conversations with Hay House previously, and it was a no until it was a yes. But she also didn't stop, right? She didn't say, well, if that's it, I give up. Perseverance.
Yeah, I remember actually when I was her post, one of the posts that she wrote was what made me go for self-publishing, because I started looking into the whole traditional stuff, and it
Yeah.
seemed so complicated. I'm a Gemini. I want things done now or
Yeah.
yesterday.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, this sounds so complicated. I just want my book to be out, and then we'll see what happens. Because I know Gala Darling as well. She self-published first, and then she published with Hay House. So I thought, for now, I just want my book to be out. And because of Denise Thomas's blog post where she explained that when you're first publishing as well, you get full control. You can still make those little changes. So I thought I would do that first. But then I'm listening to what you're saying, and it looks like, and that's one of the questions that I want to ask, is that it looks like it's such a long process. Can you expect, and you did speak about the big six, so I've got two questions in one.
Yeah.
So can you expect to make money from book sales? That's the first question. With the second part of it being, if you are not picked up by one of the big six. And if you could actually say who the big six are.
That is really hard. I don't know if I can list the six. I might be able to list 5.
Or a couple of them.
So HarperCollins, of course. And HarperCollins is interesting because the way that each of these publishers, even though they're multinational, meaning in lots of different nations, they are structured differently.
Okay.
HarperCollins have the larger, like they are one. So they now have something called Harper 360, which means when they acquire, they want world rights. And they want world rights because they might, even if you're in Australia, they might want to launch you in the US first. So they have a large umbrella and multiple massive cogs working in different places. So when they acquire you, you're fitting in with all these different things. Simon & Schuster is another one of the big six, but they are more independently run. There's a lot of influence, but just because you sell into one Simon & Schuster doesn't mean in one country, like in the US, doesn't mean you'll necessarily be acquired by Simon & Schuster in Australia. So those are very specific. Penguin Random House, it used to be Penguin and Random House, and in, was it 2013? I believe it was 2013. They joined forces and are bigger. I think Hachette. Hachette. I don't know that Hay House is considered one of the big six, but they are pretty big. But it's funny because it really reminds me that I'm in a bubble within the entrepreneurial world. And because I delve into and I like the spiritual side and all of that, Hay House. If you are outside of that, you might know Hay House, but that is not considered one of the big ones. And so almost everyone that I talk to that's an entrepreneur that has a spiritual side is like, I want Hay House. Exactly. Let me just say something really quick. Hay House is great, and they are not necessarily a great fit for you. Why? Because just because a publisher is big doesn't mean that they are going to do everything for you in particular. They do great things, but they don't have better distribution than another similarly sized imprint that may not feel like spiritual, right? So just thinking, by the way, they still market Wayne Dyer, but they don't actively, they're still a traditional publisher that has limited resources. So they are not going to be able to market you the exact same way that they market everyone else. They at the end of the day, they're a business. Now we like it because they feel like a soul-centered, wholehearted business, and we love Louise Hay and all of her legacy. However, It's still a business. So they're still going to make decisions based on that. They have to make decisions based on, will we make money? Right? So this is the other thing that I want to say, especially as an agent. I spend a lot of time talking. By the time somebody gets to me, they already know this. But we still need to say it out loud. Getting a perceived rejection is not personal. Just like editorial advice that we get, it's really not personal. It's about this thing. And in terms of publishing and traditional publishing, they're simply hedging their bets. We were talking before, and I mentioned J.K. Rowling. Well, she was rejected a ton before. Does that make her her series any less popular or well written or incredibly imaginative or anything? No. They just weren't willing to take the punt. They couldn't see the dream, right? And so we have to constantly consider this, that it is not personal. Like, so I actually tell everyone, read the 4 Agreements and recognize that Don Miguel Ruiz has it right. It is not personal. It's business. The same thing goes for an agent. Even if they love it, too many times, and this is why I do things differently now, because the most painful part for me as an agent working under somebody else's guidance was a writer could be so close. And I got plenty of writers that I thought, oh, they're really good. And my boss said, we can't take them. And so now I get to be in the position, and I guess this is why I also get that need for the control in self-publishing. I get it, because to feel empowered to say yes to who you want to say yes to say yes to a cover you like, to say yes to the turn of a phrase, even if all the best editors in the world say that's horrible. Guess what? If your tribe likes it and that's the way you talk, keep it the way you want it, right? So now I get to say yes to the people I want to say yes to. And I'm not in it for the payday. Really, really. I'm definitely in business to make money. Like, I want my clients to, but I'm not putting a time limit on it. And for me, before I get paid is just as worthwhile. Walking alongside authors. You're not going to get that everywhere. And I understand that. And that's not going to be right. Some people want a bulldog for an agent who just can negotiate an incredible contract, and they love their writing, but they know it's a commodity and they'll go out there and sell it. And if that's what you're looking for, you totally go find that agent, because they might be out there. It may be harder if they don't gel with your writing, but just keep going if that's what you want, if that feels like support to you. But if more conversation with your agent and feeling like you have a real give and take relationship is important, then hold out for that. That's not wrong. The agent is no less capable of selling your manuscript, believe it or not, even if they don't have the relationships readily. Look, I'm not in New York. I think that's clear. I'm actually down in Australia, even though I'm from the US. And I make contact all the time with US publishers. And they don't not respond to my emails because I'm not from there. So I have just as much potential of selling into that market as somebody else. But no, I'm not going for coffee all the time in downtown New York. So just one doesn't necessarily equal the other. Yeah. So it really, you have to think about knowing yourself. Like you said, I'm a Gemini. I knew I just wanted to, I want it now. I want to finish. I want to edit. I want to choose my book cover. And then I want to get it out there so that I can start telling people about it, and it can help the people that I wrote it for right now, yesterday, in fact. And so understanding yourself can help you decide what's the best path for you. There's no one right path.
Yeah.
That same thing needs to be taken into consideration when you're choosing an agent. Don't get lost in what you think publishing is like, what you think really move from here to here and go with your gut. And then know that if it's not working, you can change your mind. Even if you have a contract, before you sign the contract, make sure there's an out clause. That should always be in there. If there should be a termination clause, you should find that. So don't sign a contract that doesn't give you a clear indication of you changing your mind and getting out. So
I think we could talk for hours.
I know. And I'm happy to come back if what I've said has sparked new questions and they want to dig into it. Totally happy, because I dead set can talk about this all the time, all day.
So just 1/2 last questions.
Yeah.
How, I don't know if there's any stats or if there's anything, but does getting a book agent mean that your book is going to go into publishing?
No, it doesn't guarantee that. So it means that you've gone through the first burning hoop, right? And like you jumped through it, you survived, and actually you celebrate that part. So lots of people that I know, especially once I've offered representation, they say, is it okay for me to say, or, could I tell my mom, or could I say it on Facebook? Yes, I actually want you to celebrate every damn milestone you hit. Like, celebrate hard, because it can be a long path. However, and I think I shared this with you, one of the frustrations as an agent, and this is just pretty much any agent, because if they've decided to represent you, they believe in you, or they believe in that work. And the buck does not stop there. They don't actually get to decide if it's published traditionally or not. They just hopefully are going to give it a red hot go and give you the best chance possible of seeing it. And some will keep going. Maybe they'll, this is what I've heard, that some will go for a while and they'll say, I don't think this one is going to sell in the market right now. These are the reasons why. Hopefully, in the interim, by the way, write some more, please. Agents want you to have more than one manuscript in you. Publishers definitely want you to have more than one manuscript in you. So the best way to distract yourself during all of this long waiting period is to jump into something else. Don't sit and wait. Not only is that boring, it's not constructive, and it makes it that watching the pot, or watch pot will never boil. Like, you're just going to be killing yourself. And the fact is that they might be right. It may be that first manuscript you wrote is not actually your entrance to the market. Might just be the timing is off. I just had a conversation with one of my writers yesterday about this. She did a big revision, and we're putting it out again, and everything seems ever so slightly different from the very first time that I offered it up for publication. Not only is the manuscript different, but the temperature and the market is different. Now may be the time. So some agents will say, look, I can't sell that, and it looks like we've come to the end of the road. And that's a breakup, and it hurts. Or they may say, I don't think we can sell that. Have you got anything else? Or they may say, maybe you want to self-publish that one. I don't know many agents that say that, but maybe they want to say that. Or maybe they just check in and say, go back. Could you go back and I know we did that edit beforehand. So there are a lot of agents out there that will take you through an edit as well. Again, all of their suggestions are suggestions. So you always want to stick up for yourself if you feel very strongly. Mm-hmm. But again, they're professionals, so they're not just doing it willy-nilly. They might want you to revise it further. I mean, any number of things. But no, getting an agent does not guarantee you getting a publishing deal for that particular manuscript. I will say this. It has happened before that a first manuscript doesn't get published, but the second one does, and then they acquire the first one.
Yeah. Well.
So
And last question is how much, if there is a number, I know there can't be a
Oh,
number,
yeah.
but how much can a first-time author expect to get paid for if they do get paid for?
Yes. Okay. This one is even harder. And now I remember we didn't quite say, are you going to get paid? I kind of touched on it that there are hybrid publishers. So hybrid, I'm going to consider that kind of a little bit like what we used to call vanity publishing, which means as the writer, you're fronting some of the money, but you're actually doing this stuff with a team, and you know that you're not going to be editing on your own, but you're pretty much paying for the editing and the support, but you're not doing it alone. Again, very close to vanity publishing, but I have a much better taste in my mouth with hybrid, because in the old days with vanity publishing, there was no quality control. And it was like, if you pay us, we'll print whatever you write. We don't even care. Above that, there are lots of up and coming, both digital and print publishers that can't afford to pay an advance, but they are willing to pay for the part where they edit and they come up with a book cover. So they are actually paying. The contract in that sort of scenario, I would want to see an author getting a greater cut of the royalties. So a standard contract might have your royalties, a print version might be as low as, I really don't want anyone going lower than 10%, but might be 15% if you can do that. If you go with somebody that's more of we're not paying in advance, but we are actually taking the brunt of all the stuff for getting it ready for market, I'd want you to look more for 30%. Traditional digital, if you were going with a traditional Big Six, you might get 10% for print and 25% for digital. And then there are things called subsidiary rights. Look, we could have a whole session on going through a contract.
I was actually thinking about that.
Yeah. But, and it's all different, and you fight for different things. Like, do you want to keep film, television, and audio rights? Do you want to keep merchandising rights? All sorts of little finicky things. And some things you can't know until after. But traditional publishing, I would say, between 10 and 15, 25% for digital versions, and then the other parts. For someone who isn't asking you for money, but they're not offering in advance, I want the author to get a bigger cut. So like 30% sounds good. If they are doing digital only, I want the author to get the lion's share. Then I want you to fight for something like 70%. That might be a little ambitious, but that's what I want, because I'm here for the writer. I get what the publisher is doing, but you see, there's no way of saying there's one size fits all. Number one, because contracts are negotiated individually. Number two, like I said, it's more important to me. I still prefer that a publisher give at least a token advance, meaning they're going above and beyond just what it's taking to produce it, that they're saying, we're really betting on you. And because we're invested, so we talk a lot about this in the entrepreneurial world, and especially in coaching. People make change when they've committed. And there's this magic that happens. When you've committed money, you show up a little bit more seriously. If you pay no money, you're like, take it or leave it. Whilst an independent publisher that doesn't pay in advance has still got skin in the game, as an agent, I still want a token. So it doesn't have to be a ton, but you should at least be able to pay for a really nice bottle of champagne. But here's the thing, you're still earning out that advance. So the idea is, I would love a 6-figure advance. I know an author here in Australia for a 2-book deal, they auctioned it off, and she's one of the last that I've heard of that got a 7-figure advance. What that says to me is, oh my God, that's pressure. Number one, that's for the first book. She hasn't written the second book. Pardon me. So writing the second one, there'd be a lot of pressure. Like, this better be good. They've just paid me a bun load. And do you know how long she's going to wait until she gets another check? Quite a while. Like, you have to sell, I will just say in the US, like the only ones that are selling, and even there's a little bit of controversy over BookScan actual figures. Like, one of the political books that's getting a lot of airtime, those are selling hundreds of thousands, maybe. Sometimes it's like, tens of thousands in the first week. That will guarantee she could earn back her royalties. But otherwise, I haven't asked her. Has she earned them out? I don't know. She might just, but that would be the end. And then she wrote a third. So that would be another contract. So new contract, new advance. But do you see what I mean? It's like, an advance is nice, but if what you're looking at is to get payment, what's a better thing to focus on is, what is my percentage? And who is this company? What is their distribution? What is their experience? Like, what, when I say we put together a proposal to present to a publisher about marketing, I say, you want to know. So one of my clients rejected an offer, a contract, because we thought, to be honest, we probably have similar, like, we might have a better network than they do. So we would just self-publish, and then she doesn't have to take a percentage. She can just take she can take the whole piece of the pie, less her expenses, right? So you do want to consider that. But again, contract, different types of publisher is just so varied. There's no quick answer, I'm sorry.
But that's actually interesting, because that transitions us to the end of this interview, which is actually the beginning of the other interview that we are going to have, because I really want you to take time and talk to us about how the oh my God, what's the word? The rise of the self-publishing industry has changed this whole traditional publishing, how hybrid publishers therefore have also risen, and
that's right.
what are the different options, what are the different hues, and the different shades of publishing.
Yeah, well, you know what? I love that, and I would be super excited to talk about that, because as an agent, I really want people to go into any sort of circumstance, any kind of contract, with their eyes wide open. So it's not for me to decide what's right for somebody. I once had a client take an option. It turned out okay in the end, but it was one without an advance, and from a publisher that could pay in advance. But the contract was for digital first and print publishing maybe, and the ink was not even dry. And they switched it. Now we're going to print it. But he still didn't get an advance, and they did print it. And look, like I said, he got paid a really good royalty in the first 6 months. So by the way, royalties are generally paid twice a year in 6 months time periods. But regardless of where you go, making your decisions so that you have as little regret as possible. It's not possible to erase the possibility of being disappointed. We are living beings, and we are being challenged and learning things all the time. But I think the best way to combat regret is to have as much information as possible and make your decisions from an informed place and feel as empowered as possible, knowing where you're giving, right, and where you're retaining some control. And the new hybrids are definitely something that not all hybrid publishers are created equally either. So that's a really good combo. So you just let me know when you want to talk about it, and we will dive in.
Yes, absolutely, especially because we have spoken about a project of yours that might fall into that.
Exactly. So, oh, yes. Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. So I'm super looking forward to our next session together. But in the meantime, Anjanette, thank you so much for all that information. And
my pleasure.
As I said, I myself have millions of questions bubbling up, so I'm sure
Yes,
we'll have
that's
more
right.
questions coming. So you'll definitely
Awesome.
hear from me again. And
Yay.
yes, so
Sounds good.
thank you again. And for all of you who are watching, well, stay tuned because there's much more coming. So
Bye, everyone.
thanks for watching. Bye.